So what does day 2 in office look like?
Well, day 2, we are doing a few things. We gave specific direction to some of the reporting staff, not to the cabinet level people. So we have to start our communication chain to make sure they know what our vision is about and what they can do. It'd be inappropriate to do that before we're actually mayor, to make those communications. And in addition, we're still making hiring decisions for other positions and having interviews with existing people. So day 2 looks like that. But again, we really want to get our message out to the city in terms of what we're excited about doing. As I said during the campaign, Chris, to you and others, people want action. There's a sense of frustration, and so we want to let them know we are committed to doing all the things we said during the campaign.
I watched your speech in this room, and it did seem to really be aspirational, but you also promised to get things done. Did I take that the right way, or do you believe your speech was about something else?
You interpret it exactly the way we wanted it to be interpreted. You describe a vision, you describe an emotion, you describe how you want people to feel, and then you translate that into policy, and then you translate that into action. And that was the importance of the speech. And the action that we took, number one, are making very smart hiring decisions, reiterating what we said on the campaign trail. That's very intentional, that we don't want anyone to think we said things during the campaign trail and we are backing away from that. So it was very intentional to reiterate those things that these kind voters heard to elect me. And now we move into action.
One of the big aspirational ideas, but it was the lead in your speech, was the idea of health care for everybody. What exactly does that mean, and what does that look like in the city of Seattle?
Yeah, so you start with the problems statement, that there are just so many people, including those that are homeless, those that are working 2 jobs that don't have health care, and those that don't even know how to go about establishing health care. And so you established a baseline of quantifying that. And then you not only talk about treatment in conditions when someone becomes ill, but what kind of preventative health care can be done as well. So we have healthcare experts working with us as we speak. I actually started doing that work before I took my oath of office. And so you'll see more in writing in terms of what that looks like and the people we will reach. Most people like you and I perhaps have health care because of our jobs, but the city would be astounded as how many people do not have health care. And so we're going to unveil those numbers and the descriptions of that kind of employee or unemployed person, make sure that their needs are met.
You promised that within the next couple of months?
No, we will not be able to establish that. I mean, there's funding issues, and we need to describe it with more particularity. So no, I didn't promise that, but we'll have the plan in a few months. Absolutely.
And there are a lot of people that need health care, specifically mental health care, mental health treatment. You go a block away here from City Hall, you look down the hill, there are tents in the street. Obviously, people are getting services in this area. This is an area that does provide a lot of services compared to other parts of town. But how do you get these people who are living on the street the mental health care that they need?
Well, that's why you bring in the healthcare professionals, and we don't know what their needs are. That's the problem. All of us are making assumptions that they either need health care, mental illness treatment, drug and alcohol treatment. Some may just need a job. So again, we're going to be more granular in our needs-based approach to everyone. But that's partly the problem, is we just make these assumptions about quote-unquote those people. Well, those people are our people, and we're going to look at them differently, and I will have my team better understand their needs. Solving this problem of homelessness is not a spectator sport. You can't just make assumptions about someone because you see them living in a tent. So we will be very granular in our approach to make sure we know everyone's individual needs, and healthcare we know will be a strong component of that.
And the flip side, and you know this, is there are people, especially in downtown Seattle interests, that believe there is a connection between the public homelessness and economic recovery. So how do you appease those people who do want to see some sort of change here on the streets and have the streets cleaned up to a certain level.
And that was part of my speech when we used terms like, is this a progressive approach, or is this a hard-handed criminalizing approach? I say loudly, assume we are kind, compassionate people that answer the call of service, at least in Seattle. Assume that they want everyone housed. We understand at this point that we're not trying to criminalize poverty. But we're also not trying to demonize people who just want a certain quality of life in Seattle. That's the balance when I talked about having balance in our approach. And I'm sure there will be those critics or those who are oppositional that may shout whatever slogan they want to shout. And I'm trying to impress upon them that we hear you. We don't need to be shouted at, that we're not trying to throw people in jail because they can't survive. But at the same hand, people expect a quality of life here in Seattle, and they deserve it. So we're going to be fine. We'll make sure that our outreach consists of all people, business owners, employees, community activists. We'll be very aggressive in our approach to make sure everyone understands what we're trying to do.
And you also talked about in your speech having a new parks director, and that was one of the tenets of your campaign is cleaning up parks and giving the parks back to the people and not having as many tents. So how does that work with what you just said?
Well, it works perfectly. Our new parks director that we have yet to identify will understand that it is his or her responsibility to help us restore the condition of our parks, and not just the greenery or the tree canopy, but clean from debris and needles and the kind of trash that we see littered on the ground, and to make sure that that is not a de facto housing unit for those who are unhoused. And so you're going to see a stronger partnership in our own departments, between our housing strategy and our parks strategy. And quite candidly, I get the impression from some discussions I've had with city employees is that we have a lot to improve there, that while they are competent organizations by any stretch of the imagination, the coordination is lacking. So we are, again, through creating the position through Tiffany Washington, Deputy Mayor Tiffany Washington, that we're going to be more consistent in our approach. And they have the same vision that is basically my vision, and that is that we house people, but we do remove them from our parks.
One of the other things that you ran on and also talked about today is just the approach with the police department. I was in San Francisco last week, and that's a city that shares a lot of the same issues. It's not all apples to oranges, but shares issues with Seattle when it comes to the homelessness population, the needs for the unsheltered, and concerns about crime. And in that city, there are cops on every street corner. It was obvious in the Union Square area, the retail core, that there are cops on every street corner to make people feel safe, with all those other conditions that exist, a lot like Seattle. Have you had any conversations with the interim chief about perhaps more enforcement, more visibility in the downtown area, given all the challenges that exist?
Yeah. So I watched a few speeches given by San Francisco Mayor's London Breed, and I heard her emotion around restoring order to her streets and looking at the street crime and the burglaries and the shoplifting, and as she comes toward the end of her first term, I heard almost the sound of despair. We don't want to reach those points here. We want to make sure we're doing as much preventative work, such that everything we do is strategic. So yes, I've had many discussions with Chief Diaz. Keep in mind, I've been the mayor for 2 days. And so not just Chief Diaz, but I have to further my conversations with city council members on what our approach is going to be. I have funding for several activities, and so I want them to support some of the things we're going to try to do. So yes, it's just not eyes on the ground or police officers everywhere. That's the data would suggest that that will solve all the problems, and I think we understand that. But having eyes on the ground, whether it's a police officer or community leaders or faith-based leaders, whether you're activating an area, making sure that there's arts and culture and vibrancy, that we know these are proven methods by which we create an ambiance in certain areas that lower the crime and the feeling of being unsafe. So that's why I talked about in my speech, activating areas. It's cold right now, and we're just getting past the snowstorm, so we realize there's some restrictions on some of what we'll do. But we'll get through this, and we'll activate areas with eyes on the ground, and that does not mean just police officers.
So just a couple more questions related to this. You've already made some departmental head changes, but you haven't made a firm declaration of what you're going to do with the police department. When do you believe you'll have a decision on the future there at the top of the police department?
Yeah. So my first value that will govern my decisions is whether I have the right number of officers, whether I'm not losing officers, whether I'm able to recruit new officers, whether we have Chief Diaz as the chief or not. That we've had a lot of chiefs. So while people want to know with clarity that position, what we do from a public safety standpoint transcends that position. I need people to understand that. I think they are now. So I focus less on who that person is and more on the culture and the deployment and the kinds of officers I'm trying to either recruit or retain. So I need a little time to evaluate Chief Diaz to develop a working relationship, and I will share with you and other members of the media on a real-time basis how that evolves. But I think it would be ill-advised to just start on my first week, and my friendship with Chief Diaz would be such that I would just say, you're out. So that's just not my approach on this particular position. And I need to know what he knows in terms of the challenges that he's had as chief. So more to come, and I ask the public to just bear with me. We're pretty aggressive in how we scrutinize situations, and we're very strategic in our approach, and so it's ill-advised to move too quickly in this regard.
So yeah, you laid out some timelines through the course of your speech and the questioning today, and I preface this by saying it's day 2, but for the people who want change and accountability and differences in the city of Seattle, when can they expect that?
Well, they've already gotten some change, but I also tell people that what they don't want are knee-jerk reactions, right? And we've already created change. When I said that we had the most diverse set of 9 leaders on my exec team, that's change. When you look at the skill sets of people I brought into City Hall, and you're going to see a few more, that's change. And I think people need to know the difference between positive change and knee-jerk reaction for headlines. That's not what we do. We're passionate about restoring the city to a great condition. And so they have to be mature and thoughtful in how they view what we're trying to do. We ask them to do that. Regardless as to what political camp you are in, we realize people are hungry for decisiveness and leadership, and we're up for it. So on day 2, we had a great day 2, we had a great day 1. But in all seriousness, they'll start to feel differently, I think, because it started with the narrative that I'm saying right now. Some of the silly rhetoric you hear out there about whatever they say, let's work together. That's the one Seattle I talk about, and you're going to hear that. You're going to hear our one Seattle vision over and over. Just like Russell Wilson says, "Go Hawks." I believe in one Seattle. I believe that the division that we see in our political dialogue, in the extreme wealth and the extreme poverty, the factions that have developed over the years, I think that's what's hurting Seattle. And so my story sort of epitomizes the ability to bring together people, and so that's what we're going to be about. That will be our legacy.